Hello. Are we all here?
No.
I think we might be having a quick little technical difficulty, but I'll just start us off. Oh, there we go. Great. Hi, guys. Welcome to the return of the Revenge of the Sequel, Part Too Fast, Too Furious. Props to the genius at YALLWEST who came up with that really fun title that I had to pull up on my phone to get correctly. I'm Adam Silvera. I'm going to be moderating / participating in this conversation. If you see me on my phone, that's where my questions live. So please excuse me. I am present. I am here. I'm excited. We're all going to just quickly go around introducing ourselves and the works that we're here for. So again, I'm Adam Silvera. I'm here for the Infinity Cycle, which begins with Infinity Sun and continues with Infinity Reaper. And it is a alternate New York fantasy, contemporary fantasy, where magic is real and explores what happens when one brother gets magical powers and the other one doesn't. And my pronouns are he, him.
I guess I'm next. Hi, everyone. I'm Hafsah Faizal, and I'm the author of We Hunt the Flame and its sequel that released earlier this year, We Free the Stars. It's a YA fantasy set in a world inspired by ancient Arabia, where a girl named Zafira ventures to this villainous island where she has to retrieve a lost artifact that can save her dying world. And at the same time, we have the second protagonist, who is the Prince of the Kingdom and also an assassin sent on a similar mission to find her, kill her off, and steal the artifact for his father, the autocratic sultan. And my pronouns are she, her.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jordan Ifueko. I am the author of the Raybearer series. Raybearer comes out, or it already came out last year, and then Redemptor, the sequel, comes out this summer, August 17th. Raybearer is set in an empire of a mega continent, a mega Pangea continent of 13 culturally distinct realms. They are ruled by an emperor who's rumored to be divine, because for every person he anoints to his sacred council of 11, he becomes immune to one death. The catch is that anyone he anoints to his council can still murder him, so he chooses these council members while they are children to bond to him for life, magically, mentally, psychologically, so that they never betray him. Our protagonist is a young girl named Tari Sai, who is sent to be a plant on the future Emperor's Council as an assassin. Once she is anointed, she is ordered by her mother, a mysterious woman known only as the Lady, to murder him. And Redemptor is what happens after all of that. Redemptor. Sorry, I have like the flip screen. Quick note, if you see me tearing up at all, while I'm very happy to be here at YALLWEST, it's not because I'm moved, it's because I'm recovering from eye surgery and I have to be putting this eye with eye drops. So, all done.
We hear you. Actually, Cazadora is twinsies. It comes out August 17 as well. Yeah. So I'm Romina Garber, the author of Lobisona and the upcoming Cazadora, which is the sequel, and it's a duology. And real quick, it follows Manu, who is from Argentina, and she's living in Miami with her mom in hiding because they're undocumented, and also because she has very peculiar eyes that would draw too much attention and questions and scrutiny. And so when her mom is arrested by ICE and Manu is left alone, she follows clues to figure out who her father was and why they're on the run. And it leads her to the Everglades, of course, because if you've been to Miami, it's like everything leads to the Everglades. And of course, within the Everglades, she finds mystery and this world ripped from the pages of Argentine folklore that's been kind of like mysteriously buried in here. And she discovers that it's not just her residency that's illegal, but rather her entire existence is outlawed.
That sounds awesome. You guys are really good at pitching your books, and after a decade, you'd think I'd be better at it. But my name is Ransom Riggs. I'm a he, him. My series is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, and this is the first one. 10 years later, we're looking at the Desolations of Devil's Acre, which just came out in February. And Miss Peregrine, as briefly as possible, is about a boy who grows up thinking he's very ordinary in Florida in the modern age, and discovers that he is anything but. And he's actually peculiar. And he goes to this mysterious island in Europe where he meets a lot of people who are his age, but were friends with his grandfather when he was a boy, and they all have strange powers, and so does he. And there's monsters, and there's like 7 books.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, we have like such a range here between trilogies and duologies and 7 books. So I guess like my first question for everybody is, and feel free if you want to jump in first, like go for it, or I can call on you and we can play that game. But why are we attracted to these bigger stories? Like, why did we do this to ourselves? Because writing a series can be really fun, right? But there's lots of like highs and lows that I'm sure we will like discuss as well. What was it about these stories that we thought like could not be sort of contained within single volumes?
I mean, why do we do this to ourselves?
Yeah.
That's a question that my therapist and I have been working on for a long time, especially when deadlines come into, play. Honestly, I think that I enjoyed the freedom of feeling like I could introduce lots of elements into this world without worrying about how I would need to wrap it up by the end of the first book. The ironic thing is, I feel like I just pushed all of that panic to the second book because I don't feel like I had enough space in the duology. I should have asked for a trilogy. But I do like not having to feel that panic of like, oh, I have all of these different questions I could ask about this world, but I know I'll only be able to like cover 20% of it. So I think that's one really awesome thing about sequels.
Did you feel like having completed Redemptor now, like, do you feel like you met the satisfaction of like what you wanted out of the series?
I think so. I mean, in some ways, they're never done. They just aren't. There's always more. They're like the characters are also complex. The worlds are so intricate. But I think what I did get to finish is Tari Sai's story. And she's very special to me because I made her up when I was 13.
Oh, yay.
and it's been a long road. So that character, at least, the world could be a work of my whole life. And I was really encouraged to hear that from older, more experienced authors. I was on a panel with Megan Whalen Turner, who wrote the amazing The Thief series. And I said something about like, oh gosh, I hope I'm not a one-trick pony, like that the Raybearer universe is all I know how to write. And she was just like, hi. So I've been working on The Thief for about the length of time you've been alive. And all of it was wonderful. And so there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to stay in the Raybearer universe, but that's also just like a completely valid way to approach writing as well.
So it's definitely a life choice. Who wants to go next?
I think part of my whole thing, I would completely agree with Jordan's answer. And I would add to it that I think part of what draws me to a particular idea or project often is the world it's in. And I don't know why it is that I'm just so like setting oriented. And I sometimes have like wondered if it's that feeling of homelessness like here on Earth where it's like, well, you're not Argentine, but you're not really just in the US, but you're not like this and that. And so I like to just build my own homes. And I found that like once I build it, I have the hardest time letting go. And this is just a personality trait of mine across the board. But when it comes to creation, like to art stuff, it's so hard for me. And so I just feel like I nest, and then I'm like, well, I'm not leaving here. This is nice. This is cozy, So Zodiac was supposed to be a trilogy and ended up being 4 books. And I probably could have stayed there forever, if my agent was like, all right, let's go, and so making this one too actually feels scarier to me because it's like, wait, now I have to like jump into something else. I don't know. I just really, I feel like once you build a world, you really can you want to keep seeing how it evolves and grows and what else happens and what more. So
do you see yourself being interested in returning to it like at a companion novel level or something, or are you going to go build the next nest?
No, you're so right. Like I do see myself returning to it. Maybe not immediately, But
Yeah.
particularly this world, I feel like I'm only just beginning to understand what I'm trying to say about the immigrant identity and about nationalism and borders. And I'm just starting that conversation. So I think maybe one day I will have more to add to it. I don't know that I do right now. But what is funny is that I'm doing this Latinx anthology, Reclaim the Stars, that comes out next year that I hope everyone will check out. It's going to be awesome. And I couldn't leave this world. So I wound up, my story is set in the Lobisona universe, but it's a little bit of that where it's so hard for me. So yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny because as you're talking about that too, like I found myself like normally like a standalone writer, but I also have between Infinity Reaper launching in March and then the What If It's Us sequel, which I co-wrote with Becky, that comes out in December. I found myself now in a year of like 2 sequels where I like never had sequels before. And what you're speaking to about sort of like identity stuff and everything, I think about that with Ben Alejo, where he's a white passing Puerto Rican like me, and I am just kind of only sharing with about that experience like as I'm coming to understand it more and more in the past few years, right? And there's probably more I'll be able to say in like 5 or 6 years, but there's something kind of powerful about just like sharing where you are with it at this point in life. So I love that journey for you.
Yes, flaws and all, just like this is where I'm at, like, and tomorrow
Yeah.
I'll learn more. But I love that.
Cool. Hafsah?
Yeah, sorry, my video keeps popping off and on. I'm not sure what's going on, but
Oh, cool. I just assumed you had like a whole different life going on here.
No.
Just like doing
no,
stuff.
it just like it just pops out. And I'm just like panicking, waiting for it to come back.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so yeah, so We Hunt the Flame, once it came out, it was always going to be a duology, but like when I was writing it, I was like, what if I make this a 7-book series? Because I was incredibly naive. But I thought once it came out, it was just like all of these new people were visiting this world and falling in love with it the way I had fallen in love with it. And I couldn't see myself letting go. And so I asked my agent to like see if we could expand this to a trilogy instead of a duology. And my editor was like, no, I don't think it's a good idea. I later found out that it's because she's burnt out on long series and it wasn't because like I suck or something. But in the end, I was kind of grateful because I suffered with my sequels so much. And I think part of it was probably because I was just not ready to let go. And so I've definitely left the door open so that I could go back. And because I just kept building into this world, I ended up setting my new duology in an expanded universe from We Hunt the Flame. So I've kind of like cheated it a little bit. So it's a new series, but I'm not letting go. And I don't know if I can let go. And I think part of it also has to do with like what Romina said about that homelessness and like getting attached to this place and finding yourself in there and like you just can't let go no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, it is so tricky because I remember even with the Infinity Cycle, Harper Collins also wanted it to just be a duology originally. And I'm like, well, I pitched a trilogy and I was like, I'm going to be writing a 3rd book, like whether you guys like want it or not. And I was like, or book 2's ending with a cliffhanger. So like, pick your poison. But I honestly, like, I wish that I had just done a duology at this point. And because I'm much like you, Hafsah, like I definitely was like, I can do 7 books like this. Like I can do, I remember I was actually with Ransom and Tahara and we were just at lunch and I was like, I feel like I can do like 10 books in this universe. You give me covers like this, I will write 10 books, like get covers like this. And now I'm like, oh my God, I should have just like taken my editor's like suggestion, who's like seen authors through this process, right? He's like, it just gets harder and harder, which I guess now I'm bouncing it to you, Ransom. Like, how did you do it? Why did you do it? What takes you to like 7 books? Like, what was that journey?
Let's take this apart. Let's figure that out.
Yeah.
I tricked myself over and over. I thought I was just writing 1. I had a contract only for 1. I wrote 1. And then I was like, whew, there's a lot of world here and I kind of want to explore it. So I'm just going to end it in a cliffhanger and hope somebody asks me to write more. And luckily they did. So I had 2 books added to that. So I had a trilogy. And I was like, for sure, I can tell this whole story and explore every nook and cranny in the world that I'm so excited about in 3 books. Not so. So I think that before I start to write a book, I'm thinking about world stuff, world building, details, the fun stuff. The easily talk aboutable, pitchable stuff, and not so much the nitty gritty of the character and the heart and the soul. But when I actually start writing, it's a first person book. It's all about that character's heart and their being. And so when that starts to flow, it injects a ton of extra material into the book. And I'm like, well, that world thing is going to have to wait. And it's not just all about, showing the reader the fun toys I imagined. It's all of this. It's world, it's heart, it's interior, it's exterior. And what I thought could be done in one book cannot. Not if I'm going to pay it its due, and not make it feel rushed. So it just kept expanding and I kept chasing it. And it does get harder. It gets harder to keep it feeling fresh and keep finding new things and keep the reader feeling like there's a reason to come back. I don't know if I'd write another 7 books.
I wouldn't be surprised if you do. I think you're gonna find yourself in the same trap that led you here, where it's I didn't think it was gonna happen. And
maybe I'm tricking myself again.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is because you just have the one narrator, right? For the book,
don't do that.
You didn't even change it up for yourself. I know some authors will be I'm gonna add 3 perspectives because I am going to burn out if I have to listen to the same voice for another 500 pages, right? And you it's just you and Jacob for all those years.
You're stuck in his head the whole time, and he doesn't know that much. And I have this whole world to tell the reader about. And Jacob's dumb and doesn't know things, so it was very hard. People had to come and tell him things all the time,
God,
third person fantasy.
Is to the advantage of the reading experience, where the narrator doesn't know anything, so we get to learn everything as readers, just as they do. But it's still
that's great for the first book.
Organic ways for them to get that info is really frustrating.
Oh, look, what's this on the ground? It's a paper explaining everything. I'll read it.
Right.
You can do that once.
No. Yeah, so the other thing I'm going to ask you guys about is because how do you juggle keeping track of the details? Because I'm someone who can be a perfectionist to the point where I'm what color eyes did I give this character in book 1, right? I never had to worry about that before. It was just sort of whatever eye colors I give that person in this book, cool. It doesn't matter because I'm going to write a completely different book with completely different characters. Doesn't matter. Now I'm writing a book with the same 4 narrators across the trilogy, and there's a lot more to keep track of. Are you guys using special folders on your desktops? Do you have impressive memorization? Do you solely rely on your copy editors to catch these things? What's your business there?
Bold of you to assume that I have a strategy at all. I basically open a new Google Doc every time I need to remember something. And so it's just this chaotic melange of all of these documents, some of which only have 3 sentences in them. Is Sanjeet's mother still alive? I think she might be. Might not have time to look at it though. Another Google Doc.
Jordan, I'm so stressed at what your desktop must look like.
It's not great. I've thought of doing something like Scrivener, but I guess for some of us, I'm not going to blame all of this on the fact that I do have diagnosed, attention deficit disorder, but the way I get things done is by all of these coping mechanisms that make my world accessible to me at all times. So the fact that I'm able to work on my book, whether it's on a note app on my phone, on Google Docs, on my desktop, on a physical notebook, is what makes me get things done, because I have to make myself work when the attention is there. And so the idea of being stuck to one app that I have to use on one platform just wouldn't work for me at all. But then, then you have that problem of just well, where do you put all your notes then? Can you have little tabs and little, I love looking at those programs because it's wow, you can have a little folder for each character and you can track them out. This seems just what I need, and I would never use it consistently. So unless they have a mobile version, if they have a mobile version that lets you pop between, that would fix it for me. But
yeah. I don't think they did yet, because I use Scrivener specifically for outlining. I can't write in Scrivener. My brain just can't process that as a writing platform. But for notes, collecting world building details, remembering Ness's eye colors or whatever, I can put all that stuff in there. But beyond that, but I wish I had your skill of like being able to just sort of like write on my phone. Like I feel like I used to have that, and I just don't anymore. Like I have to be at my laptop, otherwise it's not clicking.
It depends on the day, honestly. And really, it's one of those things where I've learned if I say, hey, this is a great detail, this solves this plot thread that's been bugging me forever, I'll remember that when I sit at my laptop later tonight for my designated writing time. I won't. So I just have to write out the scene, the paragraphs where I am. But I still think it's...
How about...
Ransom,
like, how about you? Like, do you have a strategy?
I used to just reread the books a lot. I tried to keep a story Bible, and I made a couple of mistakes in the first few books where I would get things wrong, and my editors would never keep track. So it was all on me. And I just tried to like I had this program called Omni Outliner, which that's where I do my outlining. Pretty good. So I put a lot of stuff in there. But around book 4, I discovered that some people had been maintaining a rather elaborate wiki on Miss Peregrine. And I would put together these lists of my own stuff and then be like, oh, they got all that. And a few things I missed. So sort of I cheat a little bit with that.
I've thought about starting a wiki for the Infinity Cycle and then hoping that other people will go
do your work for you.
But I would definitely be like user like 01 or whatever, and just hope that
I doubt
it becomes like a promising place for me to like reflect on when I'm like, okay, dude, what are your eye colors? How old are you? How tall are you? What's your hairstyle? Because I definitely, when I saw like the series Bible for the Infinity Cycle, I was just like, yo, bless these copy editors and everyone who's like the kind of stuff that they catch is, I mean, they're wizards, right, already, and but our books would be so much messier without them. How about you, Hafsah?
So for We Hunt the Flame, I went through so many edits that basically these characters just started living in my head and I couldn't shake them. And it also helped that for like the promo materials for We Hunt the Flame, we ended up making character art. And so I could just refer to that. And basically once the art was there, it was imprinted into my head. My problem with like, if I have these random ideas and stuff, I would end up putting them in Google Drafts and like Gmail drafts, because if I open like separate Google Drafts, like Jordan was saying, like Google Docs, I could not remember where any of them were, and I just lose track of all of them. So instead, I just have them all in like Gmail and then random bits of paper, because even if I have 10 notebooks beside me, I will not use any of them. I will just get the trash, pick up recycle bits and just doodle all over them, and I have them like all over my desk. So my drafting process is very chaotic. And I feel like the more organized it is and the more I have an outline, the harder it is for me to work, which is counterproductive, but it's the only way I can get anything done.
And whatever your process is that moves you forward, it's productive. So
yeah, true.
Cheers. Romina?
Yeah, I agree with that.
See?
But it does... Hafsah, that makes me nervous though, like, because I'm the total opposite, like, where like I need to have everything so neurotically like organized and written out, like total cliche stereotypical Virgo, just like very obnoxious, just need to be in control of everything, as ridiculous of a concept as that is. And so I reread constantly, just reread I mean, at this point I cannot even look at my books because I'm so sick and tired of it. You know, it's like down to the comma and it's like reread. And then the Bible thing, like just the book, World Bible. And I do a lot of like hyperlinks within the docs, you know? So it's just like constantly, like, I don't want to like have to scroll through 100 pages, you know, or whatever. And it's just, you know, I just kind of have keywords throughout. But it's still messy. It's just that it makes sense to me. It's like, to me, it's not messy. Maybe someone else stumbling across it will be like, I don't know what kind of madness this is, you know? So.
Okay, so I want to talk about reader expectations. So how does this help your work? How does it interfere with your work? Is it something that you are like keeping in mind, especially as you are preparing for your finales or writing your finales, like in your series and everything, it's like, okay, how much are you trying to wrap up? Are you trying to wrap up everything? Like, what sort of like internal wars are you having in terms of like trying to like satisfy readers while also just staying true to the characters?
Well, soon after We Hunt the Flame came out, I was looking at reviews, which I probably shouldn't have, and I definitely shouldn't have, but I was reading reviews.
None of us should.
Yeah, I was reading reviews and I was being like, okay, this is going to give me a thicker skin. This is good, but it was bad. It was really bad. And so I was having to write the sequel at the same time. And so it's like when you're writing your first book, you're in this vacuum. You just know that you have to please one agent or one editor, and it's fine. But when you're writing a sequel and knowing that, okay, so many people have read it and that they have these expectations, some people didn't like it, but they're like, I'll.
Oh, do we?
Oh, I think she cut out.
Technical difficulties. Everybody do a dance. I don't know. Okay, I'll give it like another 2 seconds. And then we can just like hit pause.
Sorry.
Until,
Oh,
you're back.
Okay,
Yay.
so balancing those voices and also like the things that I've been wanting to do in the series was difficult, but one of the things that I ended up doing was I didn't want to wrap it up completely, despite being like, this is a duology and I don't know if I'll sell another book, but I wrapped up like as much of Zafira and Nasir's story, like the protagonist story, and then left a few threads hanging so that I could pick it up from a new character's point of view, if Macmillan lets me. We'll see.
Nice. Up for grabs.
It was about reader expectations.
Yeah.
That question really, I felt like I was a little triggered. I'm like, oh no, where did I go emotionally by that? Because it is stressful. You're so right. Like writing the first book is such a different experience from any kind of sequel, because like really, like you're only thinking, like you said, about your editor and your mom, and like that's it. And it gets rough. Like and like of course we're not supposed to read the reviews, but nobody's perfect. And then also people like will tweet at you or message you or stuff like that, and you'll suddenly realize and you'll be like, this is a favorite character and I didn't even think this person was important, and now suddenly you're realizing like you need to do something to justice for this person. Or it's a lot.
No, I felt that with like the Infinity Cycle, because people hate Infinity Sun. Like it's hilarious, like how much like people like they hate this book.
What?
And like for me, it's like now it's like the funniest thing because I'm in therapy where I joke about these things. But like it's like of all my books or whatever, like it's like the worst received book. And like people just came into it with like different expectations or whatever. But of course, like if there's like one book that you don't want people to hate, it's exactly what Hafsah was saying, where you're like, it's not the book that you now have to like write a sequel for, while people are like actively hating the book, right? And I'm just like, and my book was like a little late, and so I was like, well, how do I make this right? And also, do these people who claim that they like hate the book, but they're gonna come back for this one character, like is that gonna be enough to sort of like win them back over? And like I saw that like a lot of people who hated Infinity Sun were like, I'm really glad I pushed through because Infinity Reaper is a better book, and I agree in a lot of ways, but it still is like really stressful. And I also found myself accelerating some things that I didn't want to happen until the third book because I felt like I wanted to try to capture some of those readers. So it definitely interfered with my process and in my story in a way that I'm not necessarily proud of. But it was actually kind of like a toxic experience for me, and I'm like not sure I'm gonna like do a series again anytime soon because of these reasons.
Wow.
Man, that's rough.
Yeah.
I don't. I think what you said about like even learning that it might have been you, or it might have been, I don't remember if it was Romina or Hafsah, about even when you're tagged in positive reviews, someone saying, oh my gosh, I love this character, I would die for them.
Romina.
I'm just like, I wasn't planning to give them a lot of page time in the next book. Like, what do I do with that? Do I do anything with that? I don't know how, because I've only written a duology, and I'm so impacted by the bits of reader feedback that make it to me that I don't know how people who've written like 5-6 book series do it. I think one thing that helped me if I learned anything, even from writing 2 books, it's that you can actively choose in advance whose opinions you're going to care about. You don't always follow through emotionally, but I told myself, like, the people I'm writing to please are myself and my editor and my agent, who have been there with me every step of the way. They know my style, they love my style, they know where I can improve, because that feels very intimate. It feels like a team you, at least if you're lucky enough to have like an agent and editor you can trust. That isn't for everybody. So yeah, maybe I think my future strategy will be to decide in advance. I'm focusing on the team me, team Ray Bear.
I would say, like, remember to also listen to the people who come to your events, which will happen again post-COVID, and have wonderful things to say to you and might like break down crying or something. Like, their voices should carry as much weight as if there's haters online or something. But I feel like we're just not, most of us, built that way. And I find myself privileging the voices of discontent over the people who, have wonderful things to say, which is a habit that led me to just, don't go on Amazon and Goodreads if you can help it. I try not to do that, because in a long series, it can start to get in your head and mess with you a little bit. And that first book, it just comes from a place of, this is what I want, this is just for me and my editor and one other person or something. And then it gets a little more complicated. So that shifted over the years for me. At first, it was just about me and servicing, the story that was already like well in motion. And then, when there are a couple of arcs in my series, because it's so long, once the first arc had ended, I was like, well, okay, it's time for a new one. And this blank slate, I think, mandates that I service the readers a little bit, because I wouldn't be getting a second trilogy if it weren't for them. Some people say, oh, we don't owe our readers anything. Actually, I've never heard anyone say that. I think some people think it. If you're thinking it,
right.
It's not true. We do. We wouldn't get to write all these sequels if it weren't for the fans. So in some sense, we're writing for them too. And I think that the longer I went in my series, the more I realized I was writing it for myself and for them. So I was really cognizant of that in the final book. And I wanted to end the series in a way that would be satisfying for the people who'd been there for all that time.
While also knowing that that's an impossible task, right? Like, you're going to have the people who don't want one character to have died, or they wanted these 2 characters to get together, or they wanted more page time with this character. And it's like, I'm sorry, like, I can't, it's not choose your own adventure, like, it's, I've written this one version, and hey, like, I was a writer who emerged because of fan fiction, right? Like, that is what that space is there for. Like, enjoy it, love it. So we only have like a few minutes left, so I'm going to ask a more like simpler question, just to kind of close it off. So as a reader, which book do you tend to prefer in a series? Like, do you love like the series opener? Do you love like the middle book? Is it the finale? Do you find yourself like reading tons of series in general to even like have an opinion? Like, for me, I love a series opener, because that's when I get to like meet characters for the first time. That's when I get to be introduced to the world and everything. And, every now and again, I'll come across like a sequel or a finale that I'm like, okay, you completely blew the first one out of the water or whatever. And I can like still love them, but like, I always have like a sentimental spot for like the first book normally. So that's my business. How about you all?
For me, it's the first book too. I love the opener because you get to meet the characters, you get introduced to this new world that you can dive into. The romance is just starting off. I usually get bored after the characters get together. So it's usually the first book, and then I always get really, really sentimental at the end, the finale, because I've gotten attached to these characters. That's the only reason I've read beyond the first book, and so I don't want to say goodbye.
Love that.
I feel like for me, so I like more than books with a romantic arc. But I do really love books with romantic arcs, and I think what I return to over and over again is the moment, like, right before it's like they get together and stuff, like when they both reveal that there's mutual feelings, or someone has an initial confession or something like that, just like that slow burn in which someone decides to give up their vulnerability to say the truth. So wherever that happens is the book I read over and over again. If it's the end of the first book, if it's the middle of the second one, it's wherever that is.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like I'm the same as you guys. I won't waste more time. Like first, also same. I relish up until the moment. It's like I love Twilight until they got together, and then I'm like, aw, like give me more angst. Like,
yeah, I always love the origin story for me, and that's the challenge as a writer. You have to try and prolong that magic and reproduce a little bit of it in every book that follows. What do we love about origin stories, you know, and keep finding that in small ways.
God, that's so interesting. I really thought there were going to be more diverse answers, like from this question, and now it feels like a stupid question because it's like, oh well, it feels like the answer is so obvious. But I love it because, especially as series writers, you know, where it's like, man, like we all really love a first book, and it's like too bad we can't just like write the first book like all over and over, and then just James Patterson it to someone else, you know?
Yeah, but you did ask
that like as a verb, James Patterson.
You asked us as like, that is a good one. You asked us as readers though, but what about as writers? Like, do you enjoy more writing the first book or, you know?
That's a great question. I mean, you guys have actually all written finales. I haven't written a finale yet. So
I prefer, I much prefer 2, 3, 4, 5 to the first one. I always like the experience of writing. Yeah, for me, always. Yeah.
Oh my
gosh.
My
editor was like, it's always easier to write the second and third because you already have this world built and the characters set. But for me, it's easier to start something new because I get to like start these new characters, start this new world. I think I prefer the opener. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Same.
Love it.
The second, like, I think the third book might have been easier if there was a third book for the Rayberry series. The second book was the hardest thing I have ever done. Not the hardest thing I've ever written. The hardest thing I've ever done. The second book massively hard. First books, at least you're still playing along with the reader. None of you have expectations set in stone, including the protagonist, writer, the reader, and then second book, it's just like everyone wants something.
Ransom, we've got like 30 seconds. So Ransom, what's your favorite as a writer?
I don't think there is an easy book. The first one's hard because you're creating everything and it's a heavy lift. The second one, you're bridging, you know, from one story to another. And the third one, you have to answer all the questions you've been avoiding for 2 books. They're all hard for different reasons.
I love this conversation so much. Hafsah, Jordan, Romina, Ransom, YALLWEST, thank you so much for having us. If I had to take a pause on my Shadow and Bone marathon, I am so happy that I got to hang out with you all. Thank you for such a great, inspiring conversation. I hope this was helpful to all you writers out there in the audience, and go pick up all their wonderful books. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
Adam. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. It was fun.
Yes.
Bye.